I'm going to walk through and think about a customer experience from a different or a slightly different angle as we think about the operational activity and all of the complexity behind frontline work that ultimately allows companies to drive incredible customer success and customer engagement. So I'm going to share my screen here and walk you through a presentation that really highlights what we call deskless work. And really, frontline and deskless work, they're terms that are somewhat synonymous with one another. And the way that we define it is really anyone that works outside of an office and away from a desk. Unlike many of us that work in technology or administration and headquarters, there are simply so many people that work on the front line, as we've heard so far today from such wonderful content. And it is a pleasure to be supporting this conference as we all experience new ways of talking and discussing and collaborating together as leaders, people that think very deeply about frontline and deskless work. A great honor to collaborate and partner with Aaron and his team at Ask Nicely, and a wonderful pleasure to be here today. I'm Matt Fairhurst. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Skedulo, a workforce management platform, a product we call the Deskless Productivity Cloud. And I'll talk a little bit about that today, but mostly I want to anchor around our learnings and our experiences over the last nearly 7 years working as a company, the joy it's been to partner and engage and work with so many companies and organizations that have frontline and deskless employees and human-oriented work. You know, one of the things that was a little remarkable, I think, as we talk to the market and analysts and people who think about technology and categories and things like this as it relates to work and human productivity. And that was that frontline work and the motions of executing work at the front line and engaging with customers to deliver wonderful customer experiences is somehow a new paradigm. And it's just not a true concept. If you really look back over time, the nature of deskless work and people working outside of an office and away from a desk has simply been here forever. It's the oldest form of work, and it's been with us through all the different sort of economic and social evolutions and revolutions that the world has gone through. I think such a wonderful opportunity for us all as we talk today about frontline work to think not just about this incredibly rich experience and history that exists as people work out in the field and relate and interact with one another and different customers all over the world, but ultimately where this is going from a technology perspective and what the future can and perhaps will look like from our experience. The deskless and frontline workforce is simply incredibly large. Not only has it been here forever, but it represents over 80% of the workforce today, globally, around the world. And really, there isn't an industry or a sector of the economy that doesn't have some form of representation, service delivery, provided and delivered by frontline and deskless workforces. It's an incredible footprint. Such a broad surface area, I think, for us to think about when we think about these very general terms of deskless and frontline workers. You know, the remarkable thing that we've seen in the last 7 years is some of the disparity of investment that's happened over time relative to this sheer scale of frontline and deskless work. When you look at the investment profiles that have happened over the last 30 to 40 years, only a little more than 1% of capital funding has gone into technology and companies that serve the true fundamentals of deskless and frontline work. An incredible relative statistic when we think about the scale of what we're all talking about here today. And these are, frontline workers that are at the coalface of service delivery, human interaction, and ultimately customer experience. And this is somewhat confusing until you think about how investment has occurred in technology to support the frontline workforce and human-oriented work over time. You only have to look at the enabling technologies that have allowed us all to think about productivity at scale, whether we're sitting behind a desk and in an office with the 1970s bringing personal computing and desktop computing to us, the internet in the 90s, and then really exploding over the last 15 years. It's been an incredible change in the technology landscape that supports us as people that largely do sit behind a desk and build products and technology in an office or from home. The big enabling technology that came onto the scene really 12 years ago as we all remember, I'm sure, was the iPhone. Subsequent investments in smartphones and smart devices of all kinds. When you think about these timescales, this is a relatively short period of time that we've had an enabling technology to support frontline and deskless work outside of the office and away from the desk. When you actually get to the bottom of it, probably only 7 or 8 years ago did these devices become meaningfully capable at running really interesting, sophisticated products that allowed companies to think about the opportunities to invest in technology that could truly support people that were otherwise using very either antiquated or analog processes, paper and clipboards and all sorts of things to ultimately drive productivity, get work done, and potentially even engage with their customers. An incredible reality when you think about it. And you only have to look at the explosive growth of smartphones combined with internet technologies and the web that's allowed us all to think about what these devices has unlocked for us and the possibilities that they drive for us all today, over the last 10 to 15 years, and importantly into the future. What's possible and what can be achieved, and how do we think differently about frontline and deskless work, not only today, but in the future. It's been an incredible journey for us to think about, not just from a historical perspective and the context of frontline and deskless work over time, and these technology mediums and enabling devices that have given us all such a creative opportunity to think about these challenges, but importantly, think about the challenges themselves. Ultimately, there are so many. When we think about the complexities and the blocking and tackling of people on the front line and everything they have to deal with day to day in order to be productive and effective and drive value for stakeholders of all kinds, themselves, their customers, and the organization that they work for, and the other people that they relate to and engage with every day as we all think about productivity and getting work done of all shapes and sizes. For us here at Skedulo, we've thought about these challenges in 3 primary categories. As we've sort of talked to organizations, partnered with them, and ultimately delivered value alongside them, these 3 categories represent some of the fundamental challenges and the building blocks behind frontline work and how it's done. First is the management and organization of not only work and when it happens and where it's happening, but also the management and organization of people. Their various attributes, variables and constraints, and the things that make them either more effective for certain types of work or their availability, for example. This is a complex administrative process as you think about delivering services in this very human and frontline way. The second is the engagement and communication and activation of this work when it's happening. So how do people truly engage with the work that they're doing, understand the data that's important to them, understand and communicate and engage really richly with those that they work with and ultimately with their customers, and how do they deliver value through that process of engagement. The third pillar is what you can do when you start solving those first 2, and that is to analyze the data, quantitatively look at how to improve for the future. What does it mean to use data that comes from the day-to-day operations of getting work done and the engagement of the frontline workforce in a way that you can use it to improve and optimize work and organizations for the future, and ultimately continue to drive value and lean into the various value propositions that our customers and every organization with a frontline workforce is thinking about every day. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to work with organizations of all shapes and sizes. And Skedulo does work with a very horizontal cross-section of organizations of all different kinds. We just heard from David Benoit at ServiceMaster in Canada. And what a wonderful organization and leader that is so actively thinking about not just the work that they do and the engagement that they have with their customers and how to deliver the best possible services that they can, but balance that with the engagement and effectiveness of his workforce. Another one is the American Red Cross. And this is a company that we've had the pleasure of partnering with for several years. And, I use this example not because we're all familiar with the services that the Red Cross delivers, but because for them, these service deliveries and the management of their frontline and deskless workforces are incredibly complex. And whether it's the use case of training people all over the United States how to deliver CPR and resuscitate people, literally teaching individuals how to save people's lives, or the organization and management and orchestration of their blood drive services that happen every day across the United States as they drive vehicles and park them at locations or use buildings and different facilities, and ultimately coordinate a very diverse combination of full-time, part-time, casual, contracted, and volunteering workforces to come and service these stations as they set them up to draw blood. Such an incredibly important service they bring and offer, and an incredibly complex process of managing and organizing work, and ultimately the people that need to deliver that work at scale. As we think about engagement and activation of work, we only have to look at maybe one of our customers, SunPower. Solar as an industry continues to grow and go from strength to strength all over the world, which is not only wonderful to see from an environmental impact point of view, but it's such an interesting and challenging use case operationally. There are so many touch points with customers in the home as they go through the purchasing process and then the inspection and logistics and organization process of planning how solar can be installed within an organization and a business or on the roof of someone's home. But in the case of SunPower, an incredibly important part of how they really activate their frontline workforce is the methods they're using to collect photos and annotate those photos and collect a whole raft of information of data, the installation itself, these multifaceted teams that need to coordinate with one another to get this work done really effectively. And it's such a wonderful example of how important it is to think about this challenge of engagement and the enrichment of work itself and the workforce as they collaborate with one another. The analysis and continual improvement that you can drive when you use that data for the productivity and I think optimization of the future is well exemplified by another organization we've had the pleasure of working with, Rocket Fiber. They're based in Detroit. They're one of the fastest growing modern utilities in North America as they roll out fiber installations, not only in Detroit, but across Michigan and other parts of the United States. And they're a wonderful example of how they use data and all of this incredibly nuanced interaction that happens every day across their installing workforce in people's homes to not only drive more effective customer engagement, and use that information to present effective appointment scheduling processes that lean into the changing expectations that we all have when we engage and interact with companies like Rocket Fiber and expect the promise and the commitment of being on time and arriving when you say you will, and then ultimately delivering the service at a quality that you say you will, but also using that data to think about the future. Where do they need to hire in order to expand? And what skills and abilities across their workforce do they need to think about as they optimize not only their processes today, but use the data that's coming from that to really optimize the future? It's been an incredible year for everyone. We even engage in this digital event and we have to do things differently today as technologists and leaders and people within organizations, and even just part of the community. It's been not just a challenging year, but a very interesting year as we think about the incredible transformation that we've all had to go through as we rethink our engagement in the community, with our families, our health and safety. And I think this year has been a wonderful opportunity to see how the challenges of the deskless and frontline workforce have been truly amplified in moments like this and this global health crisis. It's been an incredible opportunity, I think, to partner with all of our customers and everyone that we talk to. As my favorite aspects of my job, and that's talk to CEOs and other leaders of organizations, and they talk about the real challenge that faces frontline workers through this period. They're the most exposed and at-risk members of our community and the workforce globally. If you think about it in perspective, we're all very lucky, people that work in technology companies or in a head office, at a computer and at a desk, to have had the opportunity to simply pack up and start working from home. You know, this is something that we can do as desk-based workers to a large extent. Frontline work simply cannot be done in the home. And although we've seen, I think, examples, telemedicine is a good example where in-home medical services have moved to more virtual environments, either temporarily or for continued adoption in the future. But you can't install a solar system from the comfort of your home. You cannot draw someone's blood from the comfort of your home, and you cannot deliver disability and health services in someone's home from your home. And I think it's been a wonderful opportunity for us to all respect and recognize not only the most exposed and at-risk portion of the workforce, but one that we truly need to respect, and I think we've all grown to respect, as frontline workers have been such an important part of mission-critical service delivery so far this year. We sent out a survey about a month ago and got some incredible results back from over 1,000 frontline workers across the United States. This was such an incredible statistic that came out of that process, that 1 in 3 deskless and frontline workers that we spoke to have either contracted COVID-19 or have a colleague that they know that has contracted it as a direct result of being in the field and executing and delivering frontline work. This is an incredibly challenging statistic for us all to recognize, and I think doubles down on this premise that frontline work is not only incredibly critical as we deliver services and value in our markets, but also the responsibility we have as leaders and as technology companies to ensure that it can be delivered and performed as safely as possible, and that this incredibly large portion of our workforce are well connected, well engaged, and feel very supported throughout this period. It's also been, I think, a period that I'm optimistic about. It's been, wonderful to see just not only the growth in certain industries and certain sectors that's come out of COVID-19, it's been wonderful to see how communities and individuals and organizations and governments in some cases have really come together and locked arms to solve these challenges very quickly and think about the health and safety of frontline workers, but also new business opportunities. And you're going to hear later today from another partner of ours, Vinny, at BioReference Labs. This is an organization that has been, for the last 6 months, pivoted into a completely new business opportunity for them as they're delivering COVID testing at scale through drive-through locations and even venues like Madison Square Garden in New York at scale for every member of the public in New York City. We saw the success of the NBA Bubble League a few months ago as they ended their season, and BioReference Labs was responsible for delivering the testing for that league at scale. New York public school system and NYU University, as people think about the return to education processes and keeping people tested and safe. And this is all delivered by frontline and deskless workers in the field that are making sure that segments of the economy and ultimately businesses can reopen safely. And it's been an incredible privilege to work with them over the last 6 months as they think about the logistics and operations of these processes at scale. So wonderful new business opportunities are emerging. And I think alongside that has been this wonderful and validated through another survey that we led that talked directly to CIOs and technology leaders throughout this period and their investments that they're making and the optimism they feel about the future. As we all come out of this or continue to work through it, leaders have made wonderful digital transformation choices to invest in technology to support the frontline workforce in totally new ways, operationally, through customer engagement, through communications technology. And it would be remiss for us not to think about not only all of the terrible outcomes of COVID-19, but also the optimism that we can have as these investments are being made as we think about the future moving forward. And that really brings me to the future from a technology perspective and from our perspective as a company. And how do we think about the really big themes for frontline productivity and engagement and analysis as we think about those 3 core pillars and challenges that face every frontline organization and frontline employee? And there is simply so much to do. I'm sure Aaron and the team at Ask Nicely and any company that's thinking about human engagement, customer success and customer satisfaction, feedback to employees, and any paradigm that exists from a technology perspective as we think about the future of frontline work and customer experience and customer engagement. There is so much to do and so many wonderful opportunities across the spectrum of operational activity I'm incredibly excited about. But as I've spoken to CEOs and other leaders in organizations all over the world over the last few years, thinking about where is this going? What does the future look like for frontline work? And what are you thinking about? What are the big challenges and innovations that you're looking to us to try and deliver and help you succeed with. And there's really two big themes that I want to highlight today across that very broad spectrum of things that we're excited to do. The first one anchors on business efficiency, productivity, organization, and the improvement of that over time, and how artificial intelligence and algorithms can truly support businesses and organizations of all shapes and sizes as they optimize the future of service delivery for their customers at scale. The second is the human interaction and communication and engagement that needs to happen and is happening today and will be more and more important in the future, not only within the workforce, but outwardly as businesses communicate with customers and lean in to this rapidly changing set of expectations that we all have as we work with companies that provide services for us. And these are really two themes that are almost on opposite ends of a spectrum and dichotomy. On the one hand, you have this very human engagement, communication, collaboration paradigm. On the other, technology and very advanced technology and algorithms to support businesses as they scale. Gartner tells us that today, less than a quarter of work, and specifically field service work, is driven or interacted with and assisted from a scheduling standpoint by algorithms and bots. And it's expected that over the next 4 years or 5 years, a very, very short span of time, that will increase to over 2/3 of this work will be scheduled, organized, and orchestrated with the support of algorithms and artificial intelligence. An incredible growth and explosion of how technology can improve the operations of any frontline organization. And I'll give you two real-world examples and ways that we're thinking about this in the future. The first one is route optimization. This is a really common challenge and very easy to think about. We all have sat in traffic before. We've all experienced the messiness of the real world. I think that definitely happens in the office when things go sideways or go wrong, but it absolutely happens for frontline workers every single day, the messiness of the real world and things that are totally out of their control. How do you predictively optimize routing and traveling and the logistics of moving from one appointment to the next throughout the day and planning for that not only ahead of time, but also reacting to things in real time as they happen every single day? An incredible problem, and one that we're thinking about deeply and applying incredible technology to in the future. The second relates to frontline workers that don't go from one appointment to the next throughout the day, and they largely are structured in a more traditional time and attendance in retail and entertainment and hospitality, where they orient themselves around shifts and a roster and checking in at the start and checking in at the end and taking breaks. And how does optimization, artificial intelligence, and algorithms really support businesses as they think about not just the costs, but the efficiencies of that process at scale? These are two examples of how really intelligent algorithms will be used in the future to drive outcomes and objectives for organizations that manage and represent frontline workers. I think it's incredibly important for us to pause and recognize, particularly now, as algorithms are seeing more and more scrutiny into how they're applied and how they're used and managed by companies and products of all kinds. We've all sort of read this and I think probably have opinions about AI and algorithms within the workplace. And that's why I think here at Skedulo, we think about these things, and we do have the responsibility to think about them really differently. How do we make sure that our application of algorithms and our customers' application of algorithms and AI is done purposefully, transparently, and explainably? And I think that's a really important point. How do we make sure that we're balancing human interaction and control to make sure our customers can think about algorithms and their application fairly and with equity across the frontline worker and how it applies to them in the real world? And you're trying to amplify and accelerate decision-making processes at scale. This is an incredibly important topic for us all to think about as technology leaders in the future. On the other end of that spectrum, as we think about the frontline worker themselves and the interaction that they can have with their customers, it's going to be more and more important. And as we speak to leaders and organizations of all shapes and sizes, it's not just the outcomes and the efficiency and productivity of the business and what they can achieve and how they can be more competitive and lean into wonderful customer experiences and value, but how do they make sure that their workforce and frontline workers are truly connected, engaged, and feel supported? Communication, collaboration, messaging, and very human aspects of getting work done and relating to one another and interacting with one another, I think will be a more and more critical part of the delivery of frontline work and ultimately the delivery of customer experiences in real time as they happen every single day in the field by frontline workers. So these are two paradigms and themes that we're thinking about for the future. And I hope this has been a useful discussion about not just some of the history and context of frontline work, the investments that are being made right now, and I think the mediums that were all made available to us over the last 10 to 12 years, but arguably probably in the last 7 years at scale. And also, how these challenges that frontline organizations have to think about every day apply in real world scenarios, and great examples of companies and organizations that have these challenges and have used technology to support them. Finally, the future and what that looks like and some of the themes that we're hearing. And I think importantly, these two incredible themes of technology and development and innovation over time. I think these two do represent ultimately the balance and the opportunity that companies have as they think about the technology that can be applied to the effectiveness of frontline work. And this balance between business outcomes and algorithms and AI and human interaction on the other side, it's an incredible opportunity. And I think winning balance, frankly, as organizations think about these challenges in the future.